So the Syrians are considered to be the masters of physical healing. And because of this, they knew that frequency was a great healing tool. And frequency is probably the most, I would say, sound frequency in itself. So there's many types of frequency, but sound frequency was probably the most effective healing tool because it works so quickly.
Level up your frequency.
Welcome to Season 1, Episode 10 of the Level Up Your Frequency podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Sun. And just as a quick recap, this season will be all about voice and how to utilize and understand the power of your own vibration, or as I like to call it, your sound print, to level up your frequency for better health, wealth, and relationships. Today's podcast is brought to you by BizMind Academy. BizMind Academy is an online training platform which is designed to empower startup entrepreneurs by helping them learn skills and tactics that can quickly be implemented into daily business processes to produce noticeable and measurable results. So if you're a startup entrepreneur really looking to take your business to the next level, but not so sure on how to do so, you can check out BizMind Academy to learn anything from how to effectively launch your business to creating a solid business plan and how to manage your time to help your business grow. You can learn about what I just mentioned, plus so much more to really take your business to the next level by visiting www.bizmind.academy. That's www.bizmind.academy, bizmind.academy. In today's episode, I will be joining forces with special guest Debbie Solaris to discuss the sound history connected to ancient Egypt and the different star races that influenced their civilization when it comes to sound healing as well as advanced frequency technology. Debbie Solaris is an ET contactee, interdimensional traveler, and galactic historian. After a fearful extraterrestrial contact experience a few years ago, Debbie awakened to her true star lineage and higher calling. Through her ancestral connection with the Akashic Records, she has been receiving downloads of galactic historical information and universal spiritual knowledge ever since. Debbie has made guest appearances on TV shows like Beyond Belief with George Noory, Open Minds with Regina Meredith, and Ancient Civilizations, all featured on Gaia TV. Welcome, Debbie. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing really good. It's a chilly, windy day in Colorado, but other than that, it's been fabulous. So just happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Debbie. Before we get started, could you please share just a little bit about your story, your passion, and why you do what you do? We all really want to know.
Yeah. It's an interesting story. I'll have to tell the more abridged version because we have a lot of questions today that we're both going to want to go through. But so I guess as far as myself, I consider myself a late bloomer as far as the spiritual movement. I didn't really get started on this path until 2012. In 2012. Before that, I was just an ordinary, unawakened, average human. Didn't have any special skills or anything. Wasn't really interested in spirituality at all. I worked a regular job. I worked in the environmental health field for a lot of years. I was a Navy veteran. Pretty much skeptical as far as UFOs and aliens and paranormal activity. My partner was a little more into that. He was really interested in the paranormal and UFOs, so I got exposed to it through him. But I would say that I didn't really get awakened until I had my own extraterrestrial contact experience in 2012. I always tell this story. It could get really detailed, so I'm going to try to tell it as succinctly as possible. But so basically what happened was one day in May 2012, one evening actually, I stayed up all night and prayed this really kind of intense prayer, asking for help for planet Earth. Sent it out to, every higher dimensional being I can think of. Didn't really expect to get a response back. I actually didn't hear anything back for 2 weeks. And then one night I just went to sleep, and then I just, found myself in a different reality. I was actually brought on board an Arcturian starship. I think I was there maybe more my consciousness was there as opposed to physically being there. Cause I think physically I was still in my bed, but my consciousness was aboard the ship. And while I was on board the ship, I had interactions with extraterrestrial beings, most notably the Arcturians. And I asked a bunch of questions of the Arcturians or to the Arcturians. They communicated with me via telepathy, and I felt like I was there for a very long time. Like I was just there. They were giving me information, and of course, I asked them, why me? Like, why me? I'm nobody special. What am I going to do? And they told me it's because I have an ancestral connection to them. And plus I'm really an Arcturian soul. I'm just here kind of undercover doing this Earth mission. And it was time for me to become activated and awakened. I have to say, yeah, I was awakened after that. There was a lot more that happened on board that ship, but for the interest of time, I think I'll move forward. But after I had that experience, I had it actually twice that year. Once in May 2012, the second time in December 2012. It was the same ship, same beings. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same scenario. The second meeting was in December, was a little bit more personal, like they were answering more personal questions. And I didn't interact with an Arcturian. I interacted with a Pleiadian, I guess, in that interaction, which was kind of interesting. The ship itself was huge. It was about city sized. I mean, it was a humongous ship. It was comprised of light and plasma. So or some sort of plasma like material, as far as I could tell. It wasn't metallic. Like a lot of these ships that these extraterrestrials have, they're not metallic because they're operating in the higher dimensions, so they're able to, formulate, craft that doesn't need to have, I guess, conventional physics, attached to it, so, and the other thing I noticed was that the ship was very organic. It kind of shifted and changed as it needed to, and it was a sentient being in itself. So the ship too was kind of reading my mind and kind of leading me to places, so it wasn't just the beings on board the ship. The ship was so huge, it had hundreds of extraterrestrial beings on it. It wasn't just like a few Arcturians, it was hundreds of beings, and they were all of different races, so it wasn't like, just Arcturians. There were, some Andromedans or Pleiadians or Sirians. And somehow as I was looking around the ship, I could tell like, oh yeah, this is a group of Pleiadians and this is a group of Sirians. And I could see like the differences, in their physicality, so that was really kind of interesting. The other thing I noticed too was that a lot of the beings, at least the ones on board this ship, were predominantly humanoid. So I didn't see think like you would think like on Star Trek or Star Wars, where there's like all kinds of crazy looking beings. The ones I saw were predominantly more or less humanoid. Probably the most different looking ones were the Arcturians. They were the ones that looked probably the least humanoid. But as far as comparing them to Earth humans, when I saw them, they had really humongous auras. I mean, Arcturians have huge auras. They are extremely high vibrational beings.
Mhm.
And I kind of had the feeling like they were pulling their vibration down to interact with me, but when I would glance at them through the periphery of my eye, I kind of saw what they looked like. They had larger heads, larger eyes, kind of smallish bodies, very thin body types. They weren't extremely tall, but I got the feeling that maybe they were pulling their vibration down so that they wouldn't appear so overwhelming to me. Because I'm not a very tall person. I'm only 5 foot, so not very tall. So, but yeah, they did not look human. Their skin tone was kind of a bluish, greenish color. Their eyes had pupils and irises, so I could tell they weren't gray aliens, like trying to pose to be Arcturians or something. But yeah, that was the most bizarre experience I've ever had in my life. And I could tell it wasn't a dream because everything seemed crystal clear. Everything seemed like it was like more real than 3D real. It was like hyper reality. It's like when you're in the fifth dimension and beyond, it's like a hyper reality. It's not, it's like once you experience that reality, when you go back to third dimension, you're like, wow, everything looks so dull and gray.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Like, so it looks so boring, and then you get depressed, because you've been exposed to those high vibrations,
Right.
So that's exactly what happened to me afterwards. I knew that I had changed forever. It's like when I woke up the next morning, I knew something extraordinary had happened. So I told my partner, obviously, my significant other, Terry, I told him right away what happened, and he didn't believe me at first. He believes me now, because I've been telling the story now for like 9 years, so
good.
10 years now. But the other thing I noticed was that initially I had all this energy. Like I was just like, wow, I can't believe all this energy I have. And then the more I kind of dissipated, more got it, integrated into the third dimension. I felt depressed for months. It was kind of like
interesting.
Yeah. Like you can't, when you experience the higher dimensional, the closest thing I can think of to describe what it's probably like is going through a near-death experience, where you're in the higher realms and then you get sent back, and then you feel this level of depression because what is you're exposed, now you're in this lower dimension again, and you're like, why
you just want to go back.
Yeah, you want to go back. Yeah, exactly. So after that experience, I noticed that my extrasensory perception increased 100-fold, where all of a sudden I was seeing auras around things. I was seeing UFOs all the time. I saw UFOs for a number of years. Just saw them all the time. Then all of a sudden I was interdimensionally traveling through different dimensions, kind of spontaneously. I was able to, at certain circumstances, read everybody's thoughts.
Wow.
That was an interesting story. Really that freaked me out, actually. I didn't like that part of it. I was like, I can deal with the auras, but
it's
hearing everybody's thoughts, that was freaky. Because most humans don't have positive thoughts. Most humans are very conditioned very negatively, and you hear a lot of their negative thoughts, and it feels kind of intrusive, and it's a big downer. So I was going through all these weird experiences, and I was noticing too, I was getting massive downloads of galactic, information. Like all of a sudden I knew about star systems. Like never studied astronomy in my life. I do have a science background, but it definitely wasn't in physics and astronomy. Or in biology maybe, but yeah, it was not in that realm. Like I knew all these star systems, and then I was seeing, events of, galactic wars. And I thought I was going freaking crazy. I thought I was losing it. I thought, well, I didn't tell anybody my story for a few years,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years maybe, because I thought it was too weird. So I didn't really speak publicly about my story until 2015, I think.
Wow.
So that was like 3 years, I guess, where I just didn't really talk about it because I thought I was going crazy. I thought something weird was happening. So I did a lot of my own research, so I was just like, I need to go online and figure out, and I ordered books and, I was reading a lot of books and went to a lot of spiritual classes, trying to figure out what the heck happened to me.
Trying to piece everything together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I notice even with my Akashic clients, like a lot of them go through this awakening and they're just like becoming like information sponges, like, oh, I got to figure out what's going on,
Right.
And so, that's my job, is to kind of help put the puzzle pieces together when I do an Akashic reading. But at that time, I didn't even think I was an Akashic reader. It was just kind of like I was just opening myself up to this spiritual journey that I found myself suddenly on. And then around 2015, I was asked to be part of a panel. So I was a panel speaker in Denver for a paranormal group that wanted me to talk about my extraterrestrial contact experience. And I was frightened. I was just like, I thought for sure people were going to make fun of me.
Yeah.
And then it was like everybody just loved my story. Everybody wanted to know more about what happened. And so I was invited to do a presentation on extraterrestrial races and galactic history at the University of Colorado in Boulder. And that was my first like really big speaking engagement. I've done quite a few since then, but then it was like, everybody locally started knowing about me, and then I got invited, to other events and got established, I guess, as an expert. Around this time, I was also taking Akashic reading courses because I found that because of this extra sensory perception being increased, I was able to download information about people. I mean, it was like spontaneous and instantaneous. Like I would know things about people that nobody knew about them, so
yeah. So then you knew you were onto something.
Yeah, I knew that something was happening. So that's what prompted me to take Akashic Records reading courses. But I do notice that most Akashic readers, they just look at Earth records. I'm one of the few that looks beyond Earth records. So I guess that's why I'm popular now, because I can look, at somebody's soul journey way beyond Earth, way before Earth or way beyond Earth. So that's how I got into what I do. And so I consider myself a galactic historian, a galactic Akashic Records reader, and starseed intuitive. So a lot of people just sometimes come to me for advice. And also an ET contactee. So that's my favorite title.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And I'm just so excited to have you here with all of your experience. And I think it's amazing because this is going to be a little bit different from like my previous podcasts. Yeah. Because we go over more of like, the metaphysics and the science and so on behind how frequency works. But now we're going to dig a little deeper and go back into ancient Egyptian times using your knowledge and your wisdom to tap into the Akashic records. And let's see what we get.
I hope I can help out. I'm not an Egyptologist by any means, but Egypt does come up a lot during galactic Akashic readings because it was kind of a gateway for souls to experience a new reality after the fall of Atlantis and Lemuria. So so it was meant to be kind of the integration of the divine feminine and divine masculine energies. So there was no longer the separation like we saw with Atlantis and Lemuria. So so I see a lot of starseed souls that have had experiences, incarnations or and or walk-in experiences in Egypt. Okay, so so that's, I think, the prevalent, I think, importance of Egypt, that it was meant to be more of an integration. And the hope during that time was that it was going to become like a very spiritual, civilization,
Right.
much more spiritual than Atlantis was.
Yeah. And that's so interesting, because it brings me to wonder about, and what we're talking about now is sound. And where the ancient Egyptians like really gained this knowledge, and where they learned to use their own sound, so their voice, for self-healing, etc. Which star races they learned this from. I talk a lot about vocal toning, and this originated in ancient Egypt, where you use sacred vowel sounds to target energy centers within the body. This heals the body. But I also feel that the ancient Egyptians use sound for so much more. And I'd like to know, your take on this, and when you tap in, what you feel, who you feel the ancient Egyptians learned this technique from.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that I see a lot in the Akashic records. So I love talking about it. But I would say the predominant races that probably were the most influential in ancient Egypt was probably Sirius and Orion. Sirius was probably one of the premier star systems as far as development of civilization. So the Syrians were a race of beings that were the descendants of Lyran and Vagan refugees from the Lyra-Draconian Wars that settled in the star system of Sirius, which is actually comprised of 3 stars, not just 1 star. But, so we're talking about Sirius A, B, and C. C at one point, I think at some point, got destroyed, and that's a whole other story, because that's where the Anunnaki came from originally. But so that's like a whole other story. But so for the purposes of this, we'll just talk about Sirius A and B, because they were the most influential. So Sirius was one of the first civilizations, I think, that really worked on technology, where they were very technically, particularly Sirius A, very technically oriented. And Sirius had they had quite a bit of diversity. So they had not just humans, but they had quite a few cat beings, quite a few, so felines. They had, bird beings. They had reptilians. They had amphibian beings that were like the Namo people of Sirius B. So they were trying to integrate technology with spirituality at some point. At first, they were working on technology or expanding technology for survival purposes, because they didn't want a repeat of what happened in Lyra. But at some point, they started integrating this technology into spirituality. So the Syrians are considered to be the masters of physical healing. And because of this, they knew that frequency was a great healing tool. And frequency is probably the most, I would say, sound frequency in itself. So there's many types of frequency, but sound frequency was probably the most effective healing tool, because it works so quickly. Sometimes it takes a while to get lights adjusted or to get color adjusted, but with sound frequency, you can get a tone and that's it. You got the tone. So I would say the beginning of sound frequency healing probably originated from Vega and Sirius. And then had its influence in Orion, so it was, they came up with a concept, but then because Sirius was so located so close to the belt stars of Orion, they brought sound frequency healing also to Orion. So so then the Orions kind of put their own flavor on it. A lot of the symbols that you see used, particularly with Reiki, because I was looking, I mean, I took some Reiki courses. I'm not a Reiki master. I wasn't that motivated to make master, I guess, but I noticed the symbols were like Sirian and Orion symbols. So I wonder if they represent toning, like sound
Right.
tones, The interesting part about Egypt, as far as the sound tones, was that, and this was something I looked up because I was just kind of curious about it, is that, some of the symbols that were used, like some of the hieroglyphics, and consequently that had an influence on, other civilizations that were in, that part of the world. So I would say kind of like the Middle Eastern part of the world, particularly Hebrew. Hebrew is actually the sounds of Hebrew, the glyphs and the sounds, and this includes Egypt as well, were based on light language, which I didn't know this initially. I did some research on it, particularly for this podcast, and I was like, wow, that is amazing. I mean, because a lot of us, that are sound healers use light language, and a lot of times it just kind of comes to us, but I never knew that there was a correlation between the hieroglyphics with light language and also with the ancient Hebrew dialect, so
interesting.
So they were trying to use physical symbols to represent tones. Okay. So if you notice, like with the Hebrew language and probably with the hieroglyphics, it represents certain tones. Just to give you an example of, this is probably the most prominent, like I said, not an Egyptologist at all, but I do know a little bit about some hieroglyphics. For instance, the hieroglyphic that represents Sirius, which is, I think, a triangle that's located within a circle, represents the sound of, sophis or sopet.
Okay.
And that represents, the triad also of Osiris and Isis and also Horus. Okay. Which is a representation of Father God consciousness, Mother Goddess consciousness, and the integration of those two, which is Horus, because Horus was the son of Isis and Osiris. So the Egyptians, I think, probably had a really good understanding of sound frequency, through these beings that were visiting, Egypt, that were probably extraterrestrial beings, but were then elevated to like God status, So, yeah, so probably Osiris and Isis and Horus were teachers, maybe they were Syrian teachers, that because they're very aligned with Sirius. And then you had, some Egyptian gods like the crocodile god, which I can never remember his name, but that was probably more an Orion, or an Orion being that was maybe, teaching the Egyptians. So they were using certain tones, I think, to create certain frequencies. Maybe, some of it was used for healing, some of it was used for technology purposes, like building pyramids, and some of it was used, maybe for, to set a certain vibration of some sort, So, so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how I see it. So,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I was just so curious about toning, and there was something about it, like it wasn't adding up as I dig through history. It's like, okay, the ancient Egyptians knew how to tone, they knew how to use sound, but where did they learn this from exactly? And you definitely helped to answer that. So thank you for that information.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated with this in particular because to me, it's, kind of when I look at Egyptian civilization, I think, gosh, they had some massive megalithic, buildings,
Yes.
and it's like, how the heck did these somewhat primitive people build these, and, so it had to be extraterrestrial technology, 'cause-
Yeah, absolutely. And that was going to be my next question or topic that I wanted to get into, the pyramids. Dun, dun,
Pyramids.
dun.
Oh, yeah, we all love
and how they were
pyramids.
constructed. And
Yeah.
I know there's so much controversy that goes on with the pyramids. Were they constructed with sound and vibration? Were they constructed through voice, through singing? I know I've heard that before. So when you tap in, what do you get with
Okay, this
the
is kind of
pyramids?
interesting. I think there was actually extraterrestrial technology that was used. So they have a thing called acoustic levitation that could be formulated to where larger objects could be carried, using lower frequency sounds. So these are sounds that are below 20 megahertz, so these are very, very low tone sounds, which is really hard for the human ear to deal with. So I don't know if the, workers were maybe using, I don't know, something to cover their ears, because it's really hard for humans to hear it. Maybe dogs can hear it. I don't know. But so what it would do, it made it possible to levitate larger objects by the wavelength, increases. So the more the wavelength increases, the more easier it is to move these large sounds. But they were using certain tools. So when I was doing my little bit of my research, they think, most conventional historians will say that, oh yeah, the pyramids and the Sphinx were built in 25,000 BC or 2500 BC, 2500 BC, which we all know that there's no freaking way, they were much older than that. Okay. So the new, I think, dates that they're using is 12,500 BC, which that's like 9,000 years, even beyond, what was originally thought. So, this was during the time when extraterrestrials were still kind of colonizing Earth, so, there was a lot, there's a lot of influences. So Earth was basically kind of like a living library where, extraterrestrial beings were, kind of seeing what they could do with, this planet, so this was even before the Ice Age, which blew my mind. I was just like, wow. So you had the Sphinx before the Ice Age?
Seriously? I know, right?
Yeah. So the thought, there's two, I think, threads of thought here. Like, some people think that these buildings were built by the Atlanteans that escaped Atlantis during the fall of Atlantis, and they were bringing their advanced technology to Egypt, which could have happened. I think is a valid theory, because there was quite a few, and I've seen this in the Akashic records where there was a lot of Atlanteans that the survivors that ended up in Egypt. So that was confirmed through the Akashic records. So I think this is valid. But the other thought is that it was extraterrestrials that were assisting the Egyptians in building these, these now, I think, timeless, structures. And they actually have glyphs in the Egyptian hieroglyphics, and there's even, murals and art that depicts technology that just doesn't look like ancient technology. I mean, it looks like stuff that we might be using now,
Exactly.
So I'm looking at these and I'm thinking they had to have some sort of, very advanced technology to create this. I mean, it didn't just come out of nowhere. I mean, to build like something like the Sphinx in the middle of the desert, that would be like impossible to do without some sort of, I think, higher level technology, because otherwise those heavy stones were just going to sink in the sand. I mean, it wasn't possible to do that, So to give you an example of this is something, a symbol that we're all familiar with, the Ankh. The Ankh is very familiar symbol. The Ankh was actually thought to be a form of technology. So it wasn't just like the symbol of life, ooh, that's, we all wear the Ankh symbol, I actually have a necklace that has the Ankh symbol on it, but
Me too.
I should have worn it today maybe, but it was actually a technology that had induction coils and copper threading through it, that created some sort of a frequency. Okay. And I think it was probably a sound frequency. Okay. So there's a lot of these things that, we see in Egyptian history that's like, okay, how do they have access to this stuff? It didn't just come out of nowhere. Now it's possible they did, inherit it from the Atlanteans, but the Atlanteans, where did they get it from?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So, the Atlanteans were actually, I think, founded by Pleiadians and maybe Lyran beings that wanted to start, this, fantastic, technological civilization, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And the Atlantic Ocean, as far as the location of it, some people think it was in the Bermuda Triangle. I don't know if I'm that sold on that location. To me, I think it was located probably closer to Africa. That's, because otherwise, how would the Atlanteans have ended up in Northern Africa?
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I don't think it was, near the Caribbean at all. But a lot of people, I think, like to, I guess, formulate, different theories on Atlantis. But the thing that I think fascinated me the most was the light language, the integration of light language. I think that, and so there was tones, I think, that came from mainly probably the Syrians, but, because they were the masters of physical healing, but also, and technologies, there were technological masters, but then also the Orion influence, so.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was actually going to ask about, the advanced frequency technology, which you got into a little bit, and the star races that played a role in bringing that to ancient Egypt. I'm so interested to hear more about that, because we know about, the voice and, you can use instruments and tones and so on and so forth, which is easy to use. But we also know that there is this frequency technology that can be used as well, which may make it a little bit easier to heal the body and, to build whatever, the Egyptians are trying to build, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I would say those are the two races. I think there was also influences from Pleiades and from, probably even Andromedans. I don't think they played as big of a part with Egypt as maybe they did in Atlantis or Lemuria. I always kind of align Lemuria more with the Arcturians and the Andromedans. So it was a much more spiritual civilization. Atlantis was definitely more technological. So that would be the realm of the Pleiadians and maybe some other star races that influenced them. But Orion, I think, played a part too. There was groups from Orion that were populating Earth, I think, in very early Earth history, because I think some of these groups were escaping maybe the wars in Orion, or maybe they were, I don't know, trying to escape maybe some integration of Orion that they didn't necessarily agree with, so they immigrated to Earth, so to speak. Right. There was also influences from Maldek, which was a planet that used to be located between Mars and Jupiter that has since got destroyed. So we had some influences on Earth, from Maldek. Okay. And basically Maldek was populated by, I kind of jokingly call it the Australia of our solar system, because it was where all the Orion government would deposit like their worst criminals, in Maldek, So it was not a very pleasant place from what I understand, but a lot of infighting and stuff like that. But they had, I think quite a bit of advanced technology, that they brought to Earth, so that's the influence of Maldek. And I don't often get starseeds that have had experiences in Maldek, but occasionally I'll run across somebody that's had like an incarnation there or something,
Interesting. So it was more like a prison planet, I guess.
Yeah, there was a prison planet. Yeah. Some people think Earth is a prison planet. It isn't really, but
not really.
Sometimes it feels like that, but
it really does.
But to go back to your original question, I would say that there was, definitely influences of, these star systems. Why in particular Sirius and Orion with the Egypt? I'm not 100% sure on that, except that I think the Sirians have been in the Middle Eastern area for quite a long time. Okay. Which, and because Sirius was, had this kind of correlation with Orion, so it makes sense that, the Orions would get involved with that area as well. But the Sirians actually, I think, started, I don't know, they started visiting Earth. Like, I think they were one of the first star races that was visiting Earth.
Interesting.
Yeah. This was like hundreds of thousands of years ago, so we're not talking just 12,000 BC, we're talking about a very long time, so, and, the Anunnaki, which came from Sirius C, they were mostly, I think, deposited in the Middle Eastern area, so they were, that's why they call it the cradle of civilization, so, so that's, the other thing I noticed too is that, as far as I kind of lost my train of thought here. Maybe I'll come back, but my mind's just going a lot.
There's so much.
Yeah, so
it's
much
exciting.
to kind of cover. Yeah, so there's definitely, I think, an influence there. But I would say those are the two prominent ones. You don't see like a lot of Arcturian influence in Egypt, which, like, you don't see like Arcturian or Andromedan, because they were more focused on the Pacific Rim area, so you see more influences of Arcturians and Andromedans in, say, places like Easter Island or Hawaii, or places that were more influenced from Lemuria. So that's, I guess that's my take on it.
Awesome. And I really wanted to talk about, the power of vibration to unlock your highest potential. And I know that you talk about certain star races that are more focused on frequency, and they use frequency to basically do everything. And I know everyone is vibrating. We're all frequency. We're being held together by frequency.
Oh yeah.
So I just wanted to hear a little bit of what you think about frequency and the connection frequency has to star beings, and maybe it could kind of influence us or help us to go a little bit deeper, dig a little bit deeper, and tap into our highest potential.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's the one that I think about a lot and I talk about a lot when I do my Akashic readings with folks. I do get a fair number of star seeds that come in with healing capabilities, and depending on what, star system they're most aligned with, maybe some of them are more aligned with sound frequency healing. Although I do think there's levels of sound frequency healing all throughout all the races. But I would say the races that probably had the most, where they were most aligned with sound frequency healing was probably the Andromedans. the Andromedans were definitely masters at sound frequency healing. Even though, the Sirians are the first ones to formulate it, I think the Andromedans just took it to the next level, where it was just even beyond, just the physical capabilities that, the Sirians were interested in, So Arcturians too, Arcturians love to work with light language, I notice. So I have some clients that, Arcturian, starseed clients that really love to work with light language. And when they speak light language, it has like an Arcturian dialect to it, which is really interesting. And I have one in particular, her name is Marianne Savino. She's actually located in your area, which is...
I know her. Yep.
I love Marianne. She's pretty phenomenal. She's one of the few that I think can speak light language in many different dialects. Like she even does like the Sirius B whale sounds and the dolphin
That's
sounds.
amazing.
I mean, she's so amazing with her light language. But sometimes she'll speak it and I'll think, oh, wow, that's an Arcturian dialect, or, oh, wow, that's an Andromedan dialect. And I don't know how I know this stuff. I don't know. It's just
you pick up on it through the frequency.
Through frequency, yeah. Because a lot of times when I do readings for people, the way I can tell what star system they're from, other than the records, is through their frequency of their auras, So, and it's somewhat based in color, but mostly it's based on a certain frequency. So when I hear that certain frequency, I know that, oh yeah, that's an Arcturian frequency, or that's a Pleiadian frequency, or a Vegan frequency, or Alpha Centaurian frequency. So
that's awesome.
So that's the way I think the wave of the future is, that we're going to be healing with frequency. We're going to be creating, I think, our realities through frequency. As a matter of fact, a lot of people don't know this, but, even the third dimension is based on frequency. And it's kind of like what I would call kind of an AI-induced artificial reality. Okay. So it's not necessarily real, because that was the one thing the Arcturians told me when I was on board the ship. Because I was kept asking, why are things the way that they are on Earth?
Right.
They really suck, And they say, well, it's all an illusion. It's not even real, So it's just kind of a simulated reality,
Right.
And I couldn't understand it, because I said, well, Earth seems real to me, I mean. But everything, as far as, even my space here, is part of this, matrix reality.
Even our meat suits are.
This is just it's just a simulation of some
right.
sort.
It doesn't feel very organic to me.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah. So I'm trying to wrap my mind around that concept, but even when you get into the higher dimensions, there's some sort of a simulated reality that is involved. So I know, for instance, in Arcturus, because obviously I'm connected with Arcturus as you are.
Yes.
So we both are Arcturian starseeds. When I look at the planet Patola, that is probably the most populated planet in the Arcturian star system. There is a reality, but it's very simulated. It does not look like, it doesn't look like Earth, but it doesn't look like just an etheric realm either.
Right.
There is, they have buildings, they have trees, they have plants, they have landscape, but it looks like kind of a simulated hologram, almost like a holographic reality. Like it's like kind of like a realm where Arcturians can do their work, and do what they do, but it's not, and be with their families and be connected,
right.
But it's not like the same kind of reality like we see here on Earth.
That's so interesting. I mean, I know this is going to be just a little bit off topic, but we're still talking about frequency.
Yeah, exactly.
So for the Earth, was there a particular star race that actually created this matrix, so to speak, created this illusion? Or is
I
this a
think
byproduct of
I think it was a
thoughts and
byproduct of quite a few different star races.
okay.
I don't think there was just one star race that could say, "Oh yeah, we're the builders of Earth." We take all the credit.
Mhm.
Uh, I think it was a composite experiment that was thought up by probably the higher, galactic councils, uh, to see what would happen if we took one planet and populated it with DNA from many different star systems.
Mhm.
So, my understanding is that there was at least 22 star races that was involved with this project.
Okay.
So a lot of times, those of us that have, connection with Earth right now that are on Earth, we have a correlation with one of these 22 star races. So sometimes I get the question of, how come you don't talk about some crazy star system that's in some other universe or
Mhm.
some other galaxy? Well, because they weren't really involved with the Earth project,
Okay.
So I usually talk about the same 15, 20, star systems, when
Right.
I do my readings, because that we were the ones that were most invested in the Earth experiment, and
Mm.
many of us now, especially since World War II, are now, most of us are star seeds, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is, I feel like it's so important for us to, this leads to the next topic. It's just, I feel like it's so important for us to understand our starred seed origin, which you do
Oh,
star seed origin readings to
yeah.
really align with our sound print. And I talk about the sound print a lot. Every human is born with specific set frequencies from the time of birth, the way that the planets are aligned.
Mhm.
So my heart versus your heart, so our organs within our body, they're all vibrating at different frequencies. So
Mhm.
your heart is vibrating different from mine.
Mhm.
But on an energetic level, we all have very similar frequencies, which is how we can connect, which is why at a vibratory state, we're all connected. So I feel that understanding your star seed origin can help you connect deeper to your frequency and can help you to really level up your frequency to the point where you are living out your life's purpose, where you're living a life filled with passion. You're on your life's path. Some people, it's very simple. Others, they have this big mission that they were sent here,
Yeah.
to fulfill. It's their soul's contract. So I
Yeah.
know this is something that you talk a lot about, and I'd love to hear a little bit about what you do when it comes to star seed origin readings and just your take on it.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great segue into that. Yeah, it's something that I think is kind of like my life work is to reconnect people with not just their galactic origins, but also their higher divinity.
Mhm.
Um, so when I do an Akashic reading for somebody, it acts as an activation. On so it's not just you getting information. Oh yeah, it's nice to know about my past lives. Oh yeah, I'm from the star system, whatever. It's acting as an activation. It's reconnecting you to a lost aspect of yourself that maybe you'd forgotten, because when we go through the third dimension here on Earth, we go through a veil of forgetfulness. We forget who we are. We forget, our past lives. It's not like that in the higher dimension. So even if you have multiple lives in a certain dimension, when you're in the higher realms, you remember all your lives. It's only here on Earth where we forget.
Mhm.
So I think as star beings, we probably set kind of like little reminders, little activator reminders, kind of to help get us back on track,
Mhm.
so that we don't get too, and we either miss them or we get aligned with them. Because I do know of star seeds that are not quite a few of them that are not quite awakened,
Mm.
but for those of us that are awakened or are awakening, we're getting activated. So going back to what you were saying about frequency and how they're aligned with certain star systems, the way I do my readings is I'm reading the frequency of that person. Do
Mhm.
they have an Andromedan frequency? Do they have an Arcturian frequency? Are they aligned with Lyra? So
Mhm.
and I do this mainly. I mean, it's not even. when I taught a webinar recently called Recognizing Extraterrestrial Frequencies, and I was using color because that's something that most people can visually,
Right.
connect with, but it's even beyond color. It's way beyond color. It's just, when I'm teaching people how to, tune into it, you can use color,
It's the
but
easiest way, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But if you're able to tune in, if you're more clairaudient like you are, you might tune into more of the tone, like, oh, they have a Arcturian tone, or they have a Pleiadian tone, so everything is based on frequency, and and so depending on, I guess, the frequency that you're aligned with, like you were, I think talking about before, that kind of determines, what your path is going to be,
Right.
because that's what you're most aligned with. A lot of us that are currently here on Earth, we, I think for a lot of us, we're very connected to one another because we're all from the original big soul group that was formulated here in the Milky Way, that came out of galactic centers. So whether we're Arcturian or Pleiadian, or, we're all pretty much interconnected, so, and I think for those of us that are, light workers and star seeds that are interacting with each other, we probably knew each other in past lives. We probably did this work in other star systems, so when we encounter each other in this lifetime, there's a familiarity that we feel like, oh gosh, I feel like I know that person, even though I never met them before in this lifetime, but
Right.
I feel this soul connection with them. And I think a lot of it is because, we have been connected with each other, through, and that's a lot of what I do with Akashic readings. I'm just kind of helping people put together those puzzle pieces, like why is this happening to me? Why am I the way I am? Why did I come here? What am I supposed to be doing here? So, so those are all questions that I try to answer. But yeah, a lot of it is based on frequency and tones. And sometimes when I go into records, I'm not seeing things, I'm hearing things. It's bizarre.
Interesting. So like, what do you hear?
Sometimes I hear music. Sometimes I hear certain tones. And a lot of times when I'm dealing with Andromedans, I'm hearing a lot of tones. I don't know, it's kind of weird. It's an Andromedan thing. With Arcturians, it's more sacred geometry and symbols and light and sound. Although there is, I think certain tones that are associated with Arcturus, but with the Andromeda Galaxy, because Andromeda Galaxy, I do get, people that are originally from Andromeda Galaxy, and they speak in frequency. They don't speak in language, so. So a lot of times I'm having to go through the Akashic guides for them to help me interpret what the Andromedan Galaxy guides are trying to tell me, because they don't speak in our language. They speak, and after a while you start picking it up. But what a lot of people don't realize is when you go into the Akashic records, it's a multi-layered experience where you're not just seeing things, you're talking to the guides, you're hearing sounds, you're sometimes smelling smells,
right?
You feel all the feelings, so that's why these readings can be so exhausting. That's why I can only do 2 a day, anymore.
Yeah, frequency has a very interesting way of communicating.
Yeah, exactly.
It needs to get through it. Like sometimes it can't get through one way, so it will try to get through a different way.
Oh yeah. And and it's different with every reading I do. It's like I can't say that, oh yeah, all readings are going to be like this way. It's like sometimes I get information in different ways because that's, based on that person's past experience or their future experience or whatever, multidimensional experience, so, so a lot of times it's so multi-layered that I think that's why there's not as many Akashic readers out there that do galactic readings, because it can be quite exhausting. It's whereas when you're dealing with Earth records, you're just dealing with one tone. It's just like
right.
Yeah, that's it. It's I think sometimes easier to get information because we have a frame of reference that we recognize, these lifetimes on Earth. Whereas when you're going into the galactic records, a lot of times you might be seeing stuff that you've never seen before, and you're just like trying to figure out like how
to communicate.
Yeah, how do I tell this person what I'm seeing when I don't even have a frame of reference for it?
That makes sense. Yeah, and a quote popped into my head from actually it was an inscription in the Dendera Egyptian temple.
Yeah,
the sky and its stars make music in you. Which is so interesting because they knew something, they knew something.
And the one thing I wanted to bring frequency. The one thing I wanted to bring up about Egypt that I didn't get a chance to say before was the Egyptians used to heal people through using these sound baths, but they were literal bathtubs where they were usually comprised of maybe marble or maybe some sort of, some sort of material, but that was probably prevalent to them. But and these were, I think, probably in some of the temples, the gods, so the Egyptian pantheon. But people that needed healing, they would fill up these bathtubs with water, and they would like kind of sit in there like a hot tub, and the Egyptians would play music. They would play music because they're trying to create a certain tone that would heal these people, with the water being used as a conductor of these tones. So the water would kind of amplify the tones so the people would get healed faster. And this was something I think I did some research on. I found this information. I was fascinated by it because I thought, oh my God, no wonder people love, taking baths, or why they love, going to the hot springs. Here in Colorado, we have a lot of hot springs here, so, because there's certain, there's certain frequencies that can be amplified either through crystal or through water. A lot of people that do crystal healing are using crystals as an amplifier. So maybe I know the Syrians use crystals more for the properties of the crystal, like rose quartz heals emotions, but. Right. Andromedans, they use crystals for amplification. So it's like,
interesting.
Yeah. So it's, so there's different, I guess, tools you can use that can, I think, correlate well with, sound and sound frequency.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And not super recently, but recently in our day and age, Dr. Emoto Masaru conducted amazing water experiments. So that's great to check out if you haven't checked that out already.
Oh yeah, no, that's one of my favorites.
It's amazing just to see what water, like how water carries frequency in these amazing ice crystals. Geometric patterns that are formed from just saying a few loving words, or even when you say hateful words, it creates just these ugly patterns. So can you imagine what's happening to the water inside of our bodies just by frequency,
by 70% water or something?
Yeah. Like that. The water, the blood, everything that's in our body. Can you imagine just having negative thoughts or saying negative words, what that's doing to our bodies? We're literally.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely correlation there.
Yeah.
I remember reading this book called We the Arcturians by Dr. Norma Milanovic. And in one of the chapters, because she was having this ongoing conversation with Arcturian beings. And in one of the conversations, the Arcturians were like, I don't know why you guys don't work more with water, because your bodies are comprised of 70% water,
Right.
So how come you're not ingesting more water or, working with water more? And I think that's very prevalent. I know when I went through my own personal healing journey, I was told, by my doctor, you need to drink, X amount of, ounces of water. And I thought, wow, that sounds like a lot, but yeah, but then I was drinking it. I was like, oh yeah, I do feel better. I do feel, like, but I bless my water. I put little sayings on it. Sometimes I put little crystals in there. So just trying to, boost the vibration of the water. But yeah, water is definitely a wonderful conductor. The Arcturians knew this, so a lot of people don't know this either. But Patola, the planet I was talking about before,
Uh-huh.
actually, when I see it in the records, it had a lot of little pools of water. These were
Interesting.
organic pools. They weren't,
Okay.
um, and the Arcturians would sit in these pools, kind of like the Egyptians did with their baths,
Right.
because they knew that the water would replenish them, would replenish
It
their
would heal
energy.
their bodies. Yeah.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the crystal healing temples that were located in Arcturus usually was by a lake or in the middle of a lake. It was usually some sort of crystal structure that grew out of the lake, or and so they were using water even within their own healing temples. Um, so I just found that fascinating. And this is just information I saw in the records. It wasn't anything, anybody talked about, it's just kind
Wow.
of stuff that I just saw in the record. I'm like, wow, this is like so cool.
That's really cool. And it makes me motivated to want to soak in my bathtub more
Yeah, me
and
too,
just
actually.
energize myself.
Yeah.
And I heard, I don't know if this is true, but I heard the water came from the Pleiades, like water was foreign to Earth. I don't know if you ever tapped into that information. I don't know where I heard it. I heard it one day that water was foreign to Earth for some reason.
That's really interesting. I never gotten that far into the origins of water on Earth, but I know that there were certain planets throughout our galaxy that were very watery planets. Sirius had very watery planets. Pleiades had water on their planets. So it's very possible that, when they were colonizing Earth, that maybe they introduced water to Earth.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't rule it out by any means. Whether or not it came from the Pleiades or someplace else, I'd have to look at the records a little closer.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I love it. And all the information that you shared, it was so enlightening, and it helped me understand a little bit more about, where sound originated and just how to tap in deeper. And you do readings, you do, like we said, star seed origin readings, you do Akashic
readings. I do
readings,
clearings, and I do intuitive readings too. Some people just have more straightforward questions and just want answers. So I also provide intuitive readings if that's what you're into. I would say the Akashic reading's probably the most popular. But I do get a fair number of people that do the starseed origins reading, because maybe they don't really care to know, or all about the other stuff, but they just want to know where they're from. They want to know what systems they're aligned with.
Right. And I'm sure many people are curious. Every time I talk to my friends about what you do, they're like, send me her website. I want a reading. And I'm like, well, good luck, because she's
the whole world wants a reading with me now. I don't know. It's kind of like I have a crazy waiting list. It's like crazy. I don't even want to say the number because it's too crazy. But,
so you guys, you better get on the waiting list now before it becomes too long.
We're moving through it pretty fast, though. We are moving.
That's awesome.
We're moving through the other thing I do is I am a galactic historian, and so I've been featured quite a few times. I think it's been like 6 or 7 times now on Gaia TV. So if you have a Gaia subscription, you'll see me on Beyond Belief. I'm also on Open Minds. You'll see me featured on Ancient Civilizations, and also I just heard I'm going to be on Deep Space. So
congratulations!
So Deep Space is happening next. So
amazing.
I'm just waiting to hear back from the producer on what dates they want me there. But I'm going to be talking about star races and galactic history.
Ooh, that's fun! I love it, and I'll definitely be tuning in and watching that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think I'm going to be featured as a guest speaker on or one of the speakers for on Gaiasphere this year. So this will be in September. So
awesome! Yes.
Yeah. So I will be. It'll be me and other speakers, but it'll be for this Ancient Civilizations conference that they're having. This will be
great. And for anyone out there who, if you're interested in a reading, or you're interested in seeing one of Debbie's trainings, you can find her work and information on her website. I'm just going to give you her website information. I'm going to spell it out for those of you who are listening now. It's www.DEBBISOLARIS. That's www.debbiesolaris.com.
Oh, you forgot the E. You
www.DEBBIE.
IE.
There we
Yeah.
go, Debbie.
Yeah.
SOLARIS. There we go.
You got it. Yeah.
Yeah, Debbie had to check me real quick because I left
Yeah.
out the E.
Yeah.
DebbieSolaris.com. So Debbie's awesome, and you definitely need a reading with her. I'm on the waiting list.
Yeah,
Waiting for my reading
We're trying
too.
to get you on there
Yeah.
soon. So, yeah, you're on the short list though.
Yay.
So, yeah, we're trying to get you on there. But yeah, it's gonna be pretty amazing though. I think to do a reading for you.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm like
Yeah.
so anxious.
Yeah,
All right,
no,
Debbie. Well, thank you. Thank you for
thank
joining
you for
me
having
today.
me. It's been
And-
so awesome. This has been a great conversation, and
Yes, I
thank you for
loved
your-
it.
thank you for your interest in me and my work. And we'll have to do this again sometime, hopefully. So,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah.
And thank you everyone so much, for joining in this week. And I look forward to co-creating a frequency-driven planet with you.
Level up your frequency.